This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is brought to you by Blueprint Health. Find out more by going to practiceoftherapy.com/Blueprint Health. And also it is brought to you by TherapyNotes. And you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes. Hello, I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, where we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast. This is episode number 218 of the podcast, and I'm so glad for you to join me. And if this is the first time for you to listen to the podcast, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're back, glad you're with me on this journey. I'm looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Alison Pidgeon. And Alison has been on the podcast a few times before, and so I'm glad to have her back. Alison is really one of those experts in the whole group practice realm. But one of the things that Alison has done is started a new venture where she has started a company called Thera-Suite, and I'm looking forward to you hearing more about that. Alison is connected with Joe Sanok's group, The Practice of the Practice, and she is a consultant and has just a lot of knowledge about running a group practice. I know that she and my good friend Whitney Owens teamed together to do something called Group Practice Boss, which is a community for group practice owners. But anyway, we'll get to Alison here in a minute and let you hear more about Thera-Suite and what she does through that organization or through that company. But before we get to that, I'd love for you to go over to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. And you'll find on that page just all of the new free automated webinars that we're putting together as resources for people. One of the things that I've heard from feedback from people all along is that they like being able to have just these short little courses or little things to learn about different topics. So far up there, we've got the using Google Workspace in your private practice, which is a free webinar. Also, we've got the Scaling Without Failing webinar, which I did with my good friend, Dr. David Hall. And also, we've got a new webinar up called just on using third-party payers or what it takes to be on insurance panels in private practice. So we've got those webinars out there. Looking forward to people just getting access to those resources. One thing nice about how we kind of changed our format, instead of having live webinars, we've kind of moved over to having automated webinars so that you can pick your time. I know all of us have busy schedules, and so I know whenever I want to do a webinar or learn something new in that format, I like to be able to schedule the time. So that's what we've switched over to. And so be sure and check those out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. And also, before we get to Alison, I'd love for you to check out our sponsors of the podcast. My tongue is tied there, but the sponsors of our podcast are TherapyNotes, and you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes, and they are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. And also Blueprint Health. Blueprint Health is a measurement-based platform for mental health clinicians to help you better have evidence-based practices within your practice, of really knowing whether or not your clinical work is being effective or not. And so I'd love for you to find out more about them. And you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/Blueprint Health. I want you to hear more about them before we get to my interview with Alison. As your practice grows, the systems and processes you have in place will keep your practice running smoothly. That's why it's important to have an electronic health record system that is specific to mental health providers. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance all right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. They're who I use in my practice. And did I mention that they are one of the top-rated EHRs for mental health providers? Their support is also second to none. So be sure to check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And be sure to use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. That's therapynotes.com. And this episode is also brought to you by Blueprint Health. One of the best ways to serve clients in your practice is through measurement-based outcomes. In fact, more and more third-party payers, aka insurance companies, are demanding measurable outcomes. And with more and more emphasis on good mental health, having a way to measure your outcomes just makes sense. Introducing Blueprint, the measurement-based care platform that administers, scores, and charts hundreds of symptom rating scales to give clinicians deeper insights into treatment progress. Ultimately, by helping behavioral health providers to grow top-line practice revenue, increase clinician satisfaction, and deliver more effective care. So be sure and check them out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprint health. And by going to that URL, you can also get your first month free. Again, that's practiceoftherapy.com/blueprint health. Well, welcome again to the podcast, and I'm so glad to have Alison Pidgeon, the one and only, back on the podcast. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I'm real excited about kind of her new venture, Thera-Suite, and we're going to be talking about that and let her kind of tell the story of how she got to that and what she's doing with all of that. So, Alison, as I start most of these episodes, even though you're a veteran and have been on the podcast a few other times, tell folks about you and how you've landed where you've landed.
I am a mental health counselor by training, and in 2015 started my own group practice and got really into being a business owner, quickly became a business consultant for Practice of the Practice. I started a virtual assistant company for therapy practices. I ended up expanding my practice and buying a building. And now I have this new business called Thera-Suite, which is a website where therapists can go on and find all of the furniture and decor that they need for their office space. So this is an idea I've actually had for a while, and it just felt like it was finally time to put it out into the world.
That is so cool. I love being able to find resources where it's just kind of all in one. I mean, because I know the one of the things I don't like to do, believe it or not, is go shopping for clothes and shopping for furniture. So it's just, and maybe that's just a guy thing. I don't know. But
I don't like shopping for clothes either, but I do like shopping for furniture.
Yeah. So being able to have a place that's really niche specific is a beautiful idea. So tell about that.
Yeah. So how the website works is that we have two options for folks. So the one option is you can look at a board And so if you've ever been on Pinterest, you'll see these, they call them mood boards or concept boards or palette boards. So basically all the furniture and decor you would need in an office is on this board. You can see all the pictures, and then you purchase the board, and essentially what you receive then is all of the links for everything on the board, and you can order it yourself and have it shipped right to you. So everything is from like Amazon and Wayfair and Target and places like that. So nothing is, inaccessible, I would say, to anybody in the United States. And you can set up the office yourself. That's sort of more of the DIY option. And then the other option is you can contact one of our designers who have been kind of vetted by me and have some healthcare experience. And you can get your own custom design made, so they can do your furniture layout for you, and they can, pick out all the furniture based on your own specifications and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's just a brilliant idea of just thinking about that. So one of the things that, I think like a lot of different parts of running a private practice, how you have your office set up is, I don't know that I've really heard anybody talk much about that. And just what, we have, I think most of us, when we went into private practice, had kind of this idea or this dream of what their office would look like and how it would be set up. But what have you learned that people kind of struggle with as far as doing something like that, just office setup?
Yeah, I think, really where I got the inspiration for the idea is from listening to or, reading people's comments in Facebook groups for therapists. And a very common question or problem that it seemed like people had were, I need a new chair for my office. What kind should I get? Or I'm moving into a new office. I need new furniture. And just like all of the options are overwhelming. If you go on Amazon or you go on Wayfair, there's literally, you type in an armchair and there's literally like 30,000 options. And so I think this is, helpful just because it's cutting down on the amount of overwhelm when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. And then I also think that, you spend a lot of time in your office, your clients spend a lot of time in your office, the environment really does matter. I know, when clients come into our office, we always get compliments about, oh, it feels so nice in here and it's so relaxing and comfortable. And, that really does make a big difference. It's not just, the therapy that you're providing, but it's the whole experience of, them receiving the service. So mm-hmm. I think that's a big piece of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some kind of design kind of tips that you would maybe give people in just thinking about, even if they already have an office, what they could do to make it more, more user-friendly is maybe a way to think about it. But, what I'm reminded of as I say this, not to get too far off on a rabbit trail, but I remember getting a new client one time, and they had been in therapy. And one of the reasons that they quit going to their former therapist is that they just felt like every time they went, it was just very chaotic, and that their office was cluttered, and they had, just stacks of paper and, just a lot of stuff on the walls and, all of that kind of thing. And that was not appealing to that particular client.
Yeah, that can be really anxiety provoking, right? Uh-huh. When it feels like there's a lot of clutter and a lot of things, and it's overwhelming to look at. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I learned. And I actually err on the side of like, you still want some decor items just so that it doesn't feel like a sterile environment, but you don't want too much either. So we leave plenty of kind of blank space, just so that it feels clean and doesn't feel cluttered. So something I learned about decorating offices is it seems like, depending on the size of your office, as long as you have something, at least 10 by 10 or a little bigger, you can fit in a desk chair, you can fit in a therapist chair, you can fit in a love seat. I always have side tables. If the room's big enough, I'll put a coffee table in between. I know sometimes therapists don't like that idea because they feel like it puts a barrier in between them and the client, but I find it just to be convenient to have a place to put tissues and drinks and things like that. I will also usually always get an area rug, even if the room's already carpeted. And I'll have the area rug kind of frame out the area where you're actually sitting doing therapy. So kind of, covering the edge of the therapist chair and the love seat or the other chair. And then, the other kind of elements that you want to think about is the tenets of healthcare design, which is, use soothing colors like blues and greens. Don't use any, furniture or decor items that might be like sharp edges or like a spiky plant or something like that, because that can make people anxious. Yeah, don't use a ton of different colors. We tend to focus on, when we bought furniture for our office, everything is like gray and ivory. And, we kind of introduce colors through the artwork and through the pillows, but otherwise just try to keep things pretty neutral. I tend to like a lot of color. And that was my, like if I hadn't worked with a designer who sort of taught me like about colors and, all of that, like, I think like the room would have looked like a rainbow, but she had to like rein me in.
Yeah. That's helpful stuff, because I think we, I know there's a lot of talk just in our common space of just doing private practice building and consulting and that kind of thing on website design, projecting the kind of image that you want. And I think your office is a reflection of that. I mean, it's, do you, I'm just curious, do you find that people tend to use the same kind of color schemes from their website in their office and that kind of thing?
I think in a ideal world, like if you talk to a branding, marketing expert, they would probably say, yes, everything should be consistent, the colors on your website and your logo and your office and all your marketing materials. Ours happens to be, I don't think at the time that was super intentional, but I like blues and greens anyway. And so we ended up using a lot of that in our logo and our website. And then, that's how our office is as well. So,
right. Yeah. So maybe to shift gears just a little bit, because I think people would be interested in this. One of the things that I know you have done very well, Alison, is gone from, you have a very successful, what I would consider a large group practice in Pennsylvania. And I've learned so much vicariously through Alison and watching her grow her practice. In thinking about growing a practice and just diversifying income, any kind of what's been your approach with that? Because you've got this new venture with therapy design and therapy. Am I saying it right?
No, TheraSuite.
TheraSuite. Yeah. I don't know why I got distracted there, but with TheraSuite, but you've also had, done consulting and just some other things through practice of the practice and that sort of thing. As you have kind of moved through this whole process of going kind of from a small group practice and just really kind of expanded to a much larger group practice, what have been just kind of your growth tips and your scaling tips with all of that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is really to hire the right people who you trust to, do the things in the practice that you don't necessarily want to do or shouldn't be doing. I have a COO now in the practice and in the VA company. And so they're really managing the day-to-day pieces of running those businesses so that I can do these other things. And I don't particularly enjoy getting bogged down into the day-to-day details. So I very much appreciate being able to be the CEO and be the visionary and be looking at the big picture. So I would say, that's probably the question that you asked is probably something that I get asked so often, because folks also know I have a family. I have 3 little kids, and they're just like, I don't know how you do what you do. And I was like, I delegate it to people, and my staff is amazing.
Yeah.
That's how I do what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess, one of the things that I think too that people probably think about is when you get ready to outsource, they really kind of get this money block of thinking, oh, I can't afford to pay somebody that's not necessarily producing income for me. I mean, it's one thing to hire therapists that you'll get the return on the investment with that. But when you move into outsourcing kind of administrative parts, how do you kind of determine when you can do that and how you do that?
Yeah, I think that was a big mindset shift for me. And I know for a lot of the consulting clients I work with, that's always something they struggle with, especially in the beginning, because it feels like, oh, all this money is going out, but they don't have the experience to know what they're getting back and how it's an investment and how they're investing money now because it's going to help them to grow and make more money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, that doing it in stages helped. I think a lot of times we just think like, oh, I'm going to go out and hire this, full-time admin assistant, and it's going to cost me $35,000 a year. And how am I going to know if this is really going to, be worth it? But I think that if you kind of do it in baby steps, and then, you sort of work up to, I didn't have a full-time assistant until maybe 2019 in the counseling practice.
Wow.
Yeah. So it definitely was a slow progression. And even like with my COO, I didn't even know if I could really afford to have a COO. And I have a great accountant who was able to kind of help me do projections. And we figured out that, if I had her start out seeing some clients and do the COO role, then I could kind of about break even on her salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, as the practice got bigger and there was more income to support her salary, then she's now like scaling back dramatically on seeing clients. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's helped me to realize that, it can be like a work in progress, and it doesn't have to be instant,
Right.
instant
Right.
COO who's doing all the things. Like it was a process, and it happened in stages.
Yeah. And I love that approach. And that's kind of how I've done the things that I've done, is just done it kind of in small bits along the way. And I think one of the other thing too is that many times it's an experiment, and that you kind of have to pull back from some things and kind of rework. Can you think of some examples of that for you, where you've kind of gone in one direction and kind of worked on something, and then think, this isn't working, and I need to pull back?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've tried different things in the counseling practice. We've tried to start other types of services, and it, hasn't worked for one reason or another. And so we just had to kind of go back to what we were doing. So yeah, it's always an experiment. You're always taking calculated risks and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I think that it's easy to get distracted and think like, oh, we could do this and we could add that. But then I think I've learned that really, you got to double down on what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
And just stay the course and do that. Like we could get into, psychiatry services and coaching and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know what? We're doing awesome with providing outpatient therapy. And so let's just stay the course with that and not get distracted by a bunch of other things.
Right. Well, I know one thing that you've, hopefully I don't misspeak here, but with your practice, you're accepting insurance in your practice?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. So, how did you decide to do that? Because, this has been kind of a soapbox for me for a little while. Is, I think a lot of times people think, well, if I'm ever going to be profitable, if I'm ever going to make any money, I'm going to have to just be strictly private pay. But I know that kind of the demographics of your area is not too dissimilar from my area. So how did you arrive at that decision, and what have been the things that you've been able to put in place to make that work for your practice?
Yeah. So what's funny is that I came out of a community mental health agency and I didn't know any different than you just take insurance for your services and you go to therapy and you use insurance to pay for it. So a self-pay practice was a totally foreign idea to me that I didn't actually learn about until I was, pretty far into starting my own practice. And I felt like, because we only take private insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not having to deal with Medicare or Medicaid. So that cuts down on a lot of the paperwork and the hoops that you have to jump through and all of the regulations. So I felt like it was manageable. And there's pros and cons to both. I know some people have very successful self-pay practices. And there's some areas of the country where it just doesn't make sense to have an insurance-based practice because the cost of living is so high. But in my area, it works pretty well. We're able to, still pay our therapists well and, accept insurance for our services. We definitely only accept the ones that are higher paying. The lower paying ones, if they were below kind of our break even number, then we didn't panel with them. So that helps as well. So yeah, fortunately we live in an area where cost of living is not super high and, the reimbursement rate is decent in comparison to that. So we're able to turn a profit. But, there's parts of the country like New York City and, San Francisco where just like, there's no way you could live on what, the insurance reimbursement rates are.
Right. Unless you were just had so much volume that you could justify
which
it.
is not sustainable. Right.
Well, that's good. So, Alison, I know there's lots of things that we can talk about. What sort of other projects have you got on the horizon for you that you're hoping to delve into?
Yeah, I know you asked me a little while ago about different streams of income. And so that's something that you always think about when you become self-employed. And so my plan is to continue expanding the practice and in conjunction with that, opening up offices in different areas and owning the real estate as another stream of income. So that is what I'm working on right now. I am in the process of put a offer in on a building and waiting to hear. That's in the county, kind of northwest of us,
right?
About 45 minutes away from our office now. So hopefully if that comes to fruition, then obviously I'll be a tenant there. The practice will be a tenant there, paying myself rent. The building will, produce cash flow. And then also one day it will, hope, knock on wood, be more valuable than it is now. And we'll make a profit by selling it one day as in addition. So I think, I've done a lot of research into real estate investing. And I just feel like, especially if you have a business that needs brick and mortar space, which I think even with the pandemic, I think we're always going to need brick and mortar space as therapists. So that's kind of my focus now is, really getting this new expansion into this other county, get that really solid, hopefully get the building, and then be able to use that as a kind of like a template, so to speak, for like, maybe, and then we want to go start another location that's, an hour in the other direction or whatever. So, yeah.
I love that. So I bet there are people out there listening that would say, "Oh, Alison, that sounds so intimidating to get into real estate and just do all of those kind of big things." What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not for everybody. I happen to love real estate, and obviously, the interior design aspects goes right along with that. So I love the idea of like, I own it and I can do whatever I want to it. And I don't have to ask the landlord for permission, all of that kind of stuff. I think too, like when we think about real estate, especially office buildings, everybody imagines like you're talking about some like multi-million-dollar building. But my first office that I bought cost $163,000.
Wow. Yeah.
It was cheaper than my house.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't have to be some, huge, intimidating, massive building with a big price tag. You really can, start small. And what's nice now is because I own that building, I can use that as collateral to buy a bigger building.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, just the advantages of being able to pay rent to yourself and not have to pay rent to a landlord is huge. And it's really not that much work to take care of it, honestly. It's like my admin, if there's a problem, she calls the plumber or she calls the handyman or whatever. And it's, nobody's living there. So it's not like, I'm getting a call at 2:00 in the morning that something's broken or something like that. So,
Right. Yeah. That's, I love that because it's a very similar kind of situation for me. I own the building that I'm in. And, fortunately my timing was good and that I got my building for $100,000 and it was just, and it was perfect because they had just renovated. It used to be a dentist's office and they renovated it to be just a kind of office space. And it had sat there and I just inquired and, I like to say it just kind of landed in my lap. But once you start into that, it really, and having a good accountant, I think, and having people that can guide you kind of around the negotiating kind of the financial side of things is really, I would recommend that to everyone. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. And so again, it's just being able to think outside the box and think bigger than I think a lot of us do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we talked about this before because I bought a dentist office too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems they make good therapy offices. Apparently.
Yes. Yeah, they do. Once they get all the plumbing and stuff taken care of. Yeah.
Yes. All the plumbing out of the floor.
Yeah. It's a funny side note. I was, one of the woes of owning a building is that you do have to maintain it. And we've had a sewer line problem that we're dealing with just kind of as we're speaking. And I was out there with the plumber and we were looking around the building and there was a little kind of shed looking thing in the back of the building that I'd never really poked around in. I just assumed that it was, there was some kind of electrical or something in there. And we kind of pulled it back and looked, and there was a port back there for when they would put in the gas for dentist office, like I guess the laughing gas or whatever.
Yeah.
But, didn't know that was back there. But anyway, I digress terribly on that. But well, Alison, I want to be respectful of your time. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and learn more about TheraSuite.
Yeah, if you want to check out the website, it's thera-suite.com, like hotel suite. So THERA-SUITE.com. And we also have images up on Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook if you want to just get some inspiration. And then if folks want to get a hold of me, the best way is to email me at Alison with one L at practiceofthepractice.com.
Quick shout out for your podcast. It's
Grow a Group Practice.
Grow a Group Practice. Are you going to be at the Faith and Practice Conference?
I am.
All right. So quick shout out for that as well. I will be there too. So that I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in person. Well, Alison, thanks again for being on the podcast. And I'm sure folks, you'll be hearing from Alison again because she's a good one. And I love having her here with us. So take care. Well, big thanks to Alison Pidgeon for being on the podcast again. And I always enjoyed talking with Alison. She is such an amazing person in that she has just got so much knowledge, and she has really grown her practice leaps and bounds. And I just admire her courage and how she steps out there and does these brave things. And be sure and check out her new endeavor, which is TheraSuite. And you'll find links here in the show notes and the show summary about TheraSuite and how they can help you in learning how to set up your office. I mean, just the physical space of your office and having ways to order furniture and learn how to do it right. So be sure and check that out. And also, before you go, be sure and check out the webinars, the free webinars that we've got available through the Practice of Therapy. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars, you can find some different topics there. We're going to be adding more webinars as the year goes along. And it's just a good way to kind of learn some stuff quickly and really figure out if this is what you want to do in your practice, regardless of the topic, whether it's learning how to use Google Workspace in your practice, or whether or not you want to be on insurance panels, or if you're thinking about going from a solo practice to a group practice. We've got 3 good webinars up there that will just kind of go over those things and give you information. And they're free and they're automated, so you get to pick the time that you want to watch them. So hopefully those are going to be helpful resources for you. And also, before we go, be sure and check out our sponsors, TherapyNotes. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes, and when you go to check out there, if you'll use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, you can try them out for 2 months for free. And also Blueprint Health. If you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/Blueprint Health, and you can find out how their measurement-based platform can help you out in your practice to really be able to do stellar clinical work. I mean, after all, folks, it is about the data and knowing whether or not you're being effective. So be sure and check them out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/Blueprint Health. And when you go to that URL, you'll get to try them out for 1 month for free to check that out. So thanks again, folks, for joining me for the podcast. Be sure and subscribe to the podcast, or rather follow the podcast. I'm still getting used to saying follow rather than subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also, just a quick plug in here for my new podcast called the Kindness and Compassion Podcast. And you can find out more about that by going to kindnessandcompassion.com. And it's a podcast about helping people learn how to live into more kindness and compassion in their lives, and hopefully make a difference in the world and kind of end some of the polarization and division that we have in our society right now. But that's why that podcast is there. And got some great guests for you to hear from. I'm real excited about this new podcast, and so be sure and check it out. And so, folks, we'll join you next week on the Practice of Therapy podcast, and thanks for joining me on this journey. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.